Alright, so to start off, let me set up a few qualifying statements. First, this video will be an analysis of the New Republic from Star Wars and how it has been written in the current canon. This will include the structure of the government, guiding philosophy, and actions taken. I will also be speaking in a more meta-analysis at the end about why the writers decided to write the New Republic the way that it is currently set up in canon. I do want to note that this will be my own opinion backed up by the content that has been produced so far. With all of that out of the way, let's get started. So the first must be discussed is what even is the New Republic? The New Republic is the successor state to the Rebel Alliance. See, when Mon Mothma and the other rebel leadership began the rebellion, they wanted to remove the Empire because it was repressive, cruel, and generally counter to their moral convictions. As such, they created the Alliance to restore the Republic, also known as the Rebel Alliance, or the Rebellion. That title is important because it clearly lays out what the rebellion was all about. So after the defeat of the Empire at Endor, which, as a reminder, included the destruction of the Executor, the death of Vader and Palpatine, as well as the destruction of the second Death Star, the rebellion went on to fight the Empire for 1 year and defeat them. I'm not going to go into why that is stupid right now, but I'd like to note that 1 year to defeat the Empire is a stupid timeline. I will be making a separate video about why that doesn't work, but that will be, again, for another time. But during the year it took them to defeat the Empire, the New Republic signed the Galactic Concordance with the Imperial remnants. The exact terms are not completely clear, but here's what we do know. First, the Empire is forced into specific borders. Where those borders are, I have no clue, because there are no maps and a few worlds are mentioned, but that's about it. Second is that the Empire could no longer train or field stormtroopers. Third is that anyone who did not comply with the treaty would be treated as a war criminal. So yeah, this treaty was actually pretty terrible. Obviously, a large chunk of the Empire did not go along with this treaty and they fled to the Outer Rim. The Republic was able to defeat the largest parts of this Imperial remnant, but was either unable or unwilling to deal with the smaller remnants and warlords. This left a large number of potential enemies not only in the Outer Rim, but the Imperial remnant that had complied with the treaty could be convinced to join a rising Imperial power if it ever came from the Outer Rim. Basically, the New Republic decided to leave a blaster pointed at their backs because they wanted to have peace sooner. What's even worse is that the Imperial remnant in the core fell apart and joined the Republic anyways. The worlds that made up this section of space were still extremely loyal to the Empire and to its ideals, meaning that a bunch of Imperial loyalists were now a part of the New Republic government. Of course, there are no details as to why the Imperial remnant failed, only details that it did fail. Which doesn't really make any sense, as the Imperial remnants should have had all the resources they needed to have a prosperous or semi-prosperous nation, and they could have traded with the New Republic. There should have been a better explanation for why the Imperial remnants fell apart, but there is a reason why the writers went with the idea that the remnants would break up. We'll come back to that when we talk about what happened to the New Republic after they defeated all their rivals in the galaxy. So almost immediately after the Battle of Jakku, the Republic reduced their military by 90%. Essentially, the idea was that Mon Mothma was all for not using the military force of the Republic to enforce its will. Of course, this is a terrible idea because you can have a military and not use it for authoritarian purposes, and a reduction of the New Republic's military by that much should have caused all their enemies to pounce on them at once. There should have been a second civil war, as the New Republic would have been too weak to defend itself from threats. Of course, the New Republic wasn't completely disarmed, and they insisted on having each world have its own defense force. Which sounds great, because then you have worlds that receive funding from the government to buy their own ships and train their own troops. But this doesn't really fix everything. See, the problem comes in when you consider how many worlds in the galaxy are actually dirt poor and unable to field the sort of forces they need to defend themselves against pirates and raiders. Sure, the Republic is supposed to fund these planetary militias, but come on, we all know that not every world is going to use the money well or receive the kind of funding they really need. And of course, this means that the enemies of the New Republic can bide their time and rebuild or build up to the level where they can threaten the New Republic and its member worlds. The New Republic is now so weak that it cannot defend itself effectively from any threat. It has no real way to coordinate any effective military response against any potential crisis, and even pirates and other criminal elements would be able to run rampant. The idea that the Republic's various members wanted this is just plain stupid. Essentially, the writers figured that people who are all for peace would also want to gut the military, which is not how that works. The leaders of the New Republic would naturally understand that a strong military would allow the New Republic to defend itself. They would then put in safeguards to make sure something like the Empire could not form again. Speaking of, let's go over the political structure of the New Republic. The Republic is made up of multiple organizations, including the military, the Senate, the Office of the Chancellor, and other things that probably exist but are not mentioned. The Senate was made up of representatives from every member world of the New Republic, just like during the Old Republic. While there is no mention of the New Republic allowing for corporations to have a say like under the Old Republic, it is safe to assume that this was not repeated. The Office of the Chancellor is the executive branch of the government and has all the same powers as under the Old Republic, meaning that someone could, in theory, pull the same move Palpatine did and recreate the Empire or something very similar. So, despite the fact that the leaders of the New Republic wanted to fix the issues of both the Old Republic and the Empire, they didn't limit the power of the Chancellor. Yeah, okay, I totally believe that. Now, despite what I just said, apparently the Office of Chancellor had little to no authority according to the novel Bloodlines. So, somewhere between Mon Mothma's reign as Chancellor and the events of Bloodlines, the office lost much of its power. This is 24 years after the founding of the New Republic, by the way. Now is probably the best time to talk about the collapsed Imperial remnants from earlier. See, they formed an unofficial political party called the Centrists, who wanted more power given to the highest tiers of government so that they could centralize government power. The other party that was also unofficial was the Populists. They wanted to keep everything at the planetary level. This division further weakened the New Republic, and it even led to an attempt to create a new office that was called First Senator. This office was the chancellorship, but with more authority. This doesn't really make sense when you consider that you could have just passed legislation to give the chancellor more power instead of making a whole new office and replacing the chancellor with it. At this point, there is an extreme political disunity in the New Republic because no one is able to bring everyone together like Mon Mothma did, which doesn't make sense because this assumes that republics can't have good leaders after their founders die, and there isn't really a great explanation as to why the New Republic was unable to get its act together to run the galaxy. So I have to assume that the writers went with this because they needed to set up the events of The Force Awakens. If the Republic is too weak to defend itself, then someone like Leia has to step up and form something like the Resistance to defeat the First Order. But before I continue that line of thought, let me finish with the New Republic. So after the New Republic was founded, it had to decide on what planet would be their capital. Instead of one world being the capital, they instead decided the capital would move around from world to world. I have no idea when or how this would be decided, as there's nothing to suggest that anyone thought that far through the idea. Additionally, this idea doesn't really make sense. The idea was that by distancing themselves from Coruscant, the New Republic was showing that they would be different from the Old Republic and the Empire. But this doesn't make sense as Coruscant was the capital for every major power in the galaxy. Owning that world gave the government that had it legitimacy. Moving the capital around doesn't really do anything except add an extra burden to the world that it's on. I mean, think about it. First, you have to have a Senate chamber that can fit all the senators from every world in the New Republic. Then you have to have offices for all of them. And you need housing for the senators, their staff, their families, etc. Then you need various support staff and space for their families. You need the resources to feed all of those people, and you need a spaceport that can handle all of the traffic from all of the stuff needed to run everything. And you also need the offices for the various parts of the government and all of their staff and all their families too. Think like the Department of Energy, the Military High Command, and all of those offices. Then, once a new world is selected, all of the stuff that you built for the government is effectively abandoned. So you spent all of that money and now have a lot of space that is no longer in use. It's like when a city holds the Olympic Games. All of the infrastructure gets built for the athletes and the fans, but once it's all over, the stuff that was built is left to rot. And most of the time, the city doesn't even make a ton of money to offset what they spent building everything. Now just take that idea and upscale it to a galaxy-wide government. All this could be avoided by just having the capital be Coruscant, which had all of that infrastructure that the government needed. Again, this does not feel like a smart in-universe move. Instead, it feels like a writing decision that exists to try and justify The Force Awakens. After all, if Coruscant had been the capital, then it would have been blown up in the movie, which would have been bad. The issue I have with all these things is that none of these moves feel like real decisions that were made by people living in the Star Wars universe. They were all writing decisions that were meant to accomplish a goal. That goal was to make the New Republic as weak as possible. The reason Disney wanted the New Republic weak was so that it could have the First Order versus the Resistance. Why did it want that dynamic? Simple. Because it was an attempt to recreate the magic of the original trilogy. So instead of giving us a new direction for Star Wars to take, they decided instead to make an idiot plot that could allow for their new trilogy to exist. All of the decisions that the New Republic makes in canon are not intelligent decisions made by flawed but rational rational actors. They are decisions that only make sense because we know where it all leads to. This is all after the fact justification for their movies. If you take any of these decisions and look at them on their own, you would question the logic behind them. And all of this stuff is buried in the comics and books, which, let's be real, most people don't read. So what could the New Republic have done if the writers had not been trying to backfill in details to justify a movie? Well, first and foremost, they should have kept battling the Empire until they were no longer capable of fighting back. This would have made an unconditional surrender make more sense. This would also leave the Empire in a position further away from the core and more towards the Outer Rim. This way, if they still wanted to have the First Order exist, it would give them more plausibility, as the Imperial Remnant would want to work with the First Order to destroy the Republic. Second, have the New Republic not demilitarize. That was a really bad idea that no government would realistically go through with. Now, having the New Republic change its military to a more defensive role, or even downsizing it after the defeat of the Empire, would make sense. But losing 90% of your military and telling your member worlds that they're on their own is just moronic. Third, have the New Republic actually be competent politically. Governments don't fall into decay and collapse in 30 years, and especially not when they have founders like Mon Mothma and Leia. These are brilliant politicians who would know how to make the system better while avoiding the issues of both the Old Republic and the Empire. Fourth, have the New Republic actually investigate the First Order. Yeah, only Leia investigates the First Order in canon. Everyone else just sticks their fingers in their ears like petulant children and refuses to listen. That's the reason why Leia had to start the Resistance in the first place. I would have loved to see what a rearmed Empire versus a full-powered New Republic would have been like. It definitely would have been better than what we got. There are definitely more ways to make all of this work, but these are just my thoughts on the matter. I think the basic ideas of the new movies work, but there is too much stuff in them that makes everything seem completely stupid. By making everyone incompetent and stupid except for the heroes, you just end up making an idiot plot, or in this case, an idiot setting. And all that does is discredit the original creators of this that you have inherited the property from. But that's just my thoughts on it. If you have any ideas on what you would have liked to have seen from Star Wars or how to make things better, leave them in the comments below and tell me what you think. As always, this has been Veiled Shadow. See you later.